Their campfire refused to stay lit, no matter how many times they rebuilt it. Each log they placed and each spark they coaxed into flame collapsed into a dull, smoldering ash within moments, leaving the clearing almost as dark as the surrounding forest. The night air was thick with the smell of wet pine and moss, and the wind whispered in the branches above, carrying a rustling sound that didn't belong to the trees. Mark crouched low, shaking a small bundle of tinder in his hands, his fingers stiff with cold. "It's like the woods wet," he said, though he didn't believe it. He held a lighter to the bundle again, but the flame sputtered, bent sideways, and died. "You're doing something wrong," Jess said, sitting cross-legged on the damp ground, rubbing her arms. Her voice had that tight, forced quality people use when they're trying to convince themselves of something they don't fully believe. "Maybe we're just impatient." "No," Daniel muttered, kneeling beside Mark. He shoved another log into the heap, but before it could catch, a chill wind whipped through the clearing, scattering sparks and leaving the pile blackened. He froze, listening. There was a silence in the forest that wasn't quite silence. It was heavier than darkness, like a presence pressing just beyond the reach of their senses. Maya shivered. It's like the forest doesn't want it. "Look, every time we get a flame, it dies." Her eyes swept the tree line, trying to pierce the blackness. The shadows seemed to move just slightly, not with wind or life, but with a subtle, deliberate shifting, like the forest itself was drawing closer. "Stop it," Mark said sharply. "Stop acting like it's alive." Jess's laugh was hollow. "It's just trees." But the forest didn't respond like trees. Every snap of a twig sounded too deliberate, too measured to be random. Each time they tried to relight the fire, the rustling would intensify, as if something was circling them, staying just outside the clearing, invisible but attentive. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed to have unspooled and twisted in the dense night. They tried everything. Rearranging logs, using kindling, sheltering the fire from the wind. Nothing held. And all the while, the forest's noises continued, subtle and precise, growing more impatient with each failure. Daniel finally stood, pacing. "Maybe we're too deep. Maybe we should pack up and move closer to the trail." His voice cracked against the oppressive quiet. "Too deep?" Jess asked, frustration slipping into her tone. "We're not even a mile off the path." Maya's eyes darted around the clearing. "Something's watching us," she whispered. "I feel it. Every time we try to light the fire, it's like it waits, then snuffs it out." Mark shook his head, gripping a log so tightly that splinters pierced his palms. "It's the wind, that's all. Trees, wildlife." But even as he said it, a faint, deliberate thump echoed behind them. A log falling in a pattern that made no sense. They all froze, listening. A long, slow inhale of air, too deep to be any animal they knew, rustled the treetops. Maya swallowed hard. "This isn't right. It's like it's learning us." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Learning what?" Jess didn't answer. She just watched, rigid, as the shadows between the trees lengthened unnaturally, stretching toward the clearing. The wind had died entirely. The forest was holding its breath, and the campers could feel it, pressing in from every direction. Mark kicked at the log pile in frustration. "Fine, then we don't need a fire. We'll just—" His words died when the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop sharply, icy fingers crawling up his spine. The air became viscous, heavier, almost audible as it moved around them. They huddled together, backs touching, sharing warmth that wasn't enough. Their breath rose in clouds that faded instantly, swallowed by the dark. And then, faintly, they heard it. A whisper. Not a word, not a name. But the sound was unmistakably human, threaded with the inflection of fear and curiosity. It came from the shadows, circling the clearing. They turned toward it. Mark, Jess, Daniel, Maya, but the darkness yielded nothing. Only the trees, black and patient. "What was that?" Jess's voice trembled. "Probably an animal," Mark said. though the rationality of it sounded wrong to his own ears. Another whisper, slightly louder, closer, brushed past Maya's ear. She flinched, spinning, but there was nothing. The clearing remained empty, save for them and the unlit logs. Daniel grabbed a flashlight from his pack, swinging it in a tight circle. The beam cut through the night, illuminating nothing but gnarled trunks, moss, and the uneven forest floor. Yet even as the light moved, they felt the darkness recoil and then advance again, as though it had its own will. They tried to move the campfire again. Sparks ignited for a brief heartbeat, and in that moment, the shadows recoiled slightly. But the fire never took. The wood blackened, crumbling to ash instantly. And with each failed attempt, the forest seemed to close in further, trees leaning subtly, trunks shifting imperceptibly. Maya whispered, "It's mocking us." Jess laughed, but it was brittle, hollow. "No, it's intelligent." Mark frowned, gripping another log. "That's impossible." But the impossible was there. In the silence, in the precise movements of shadow, in the deliberate snuffing of flame, in the almost human exhale that surrounded them. Time stretched, their nerves frayed. Every small sound, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a branch, felt amplified, meaningful. Then, without warning, the darkness between the trees swelled toward them. Not a shadow, not a shape, but a pressure, a force that made them step back instinctively. The clearing felt smaller, tighter. The forest watched, considered, and perhaps enjoyed the small terror it provoked. They backed into each other, trying to preserve warmth and courage. The whispers came again, faintly mocking, impossibly close. Maya, voice trembling, pointed at the logs. "It doesn't want the fire. That's why every time." Her words broke as a faint glow flickered on the far edge of the clearing, just for an instant, like embers from some otherworldly source. But before any of them could react, it vanished. No sound, no crackle, only emptiness. Daniel shook his head, gripping the flashlight. "We need to leave. Now." They grabbed their packs, hurriedly, stepping over blackened ash. But the forest didn't guide them. It resisted. Every step forward felt misaligned, like the clearing had subtly shifted while they weren't looking. Paths they remembered were gone, replaced with thick underbrush and gnarled roots. Jess's flashlight caught something briefly. A tree, but the bark was subtly wrong. This texture moved, almost imperceptibly, like it was breathing. She blinked, and it was normal again. They stumbled, trying to follow some remembered trail, but every direction felt wrong. Every sound, the whispering, the snapping, the rustle of leaves, felt orchestrated. Finally, exhausted and terrified, they collapsed against a fallen log. The darkness surrounded them completely. No stars, no moonlight, no hint of the path they had arrived on. Only the forest, waiting, watching. Mark tried again to light a match. Sparks flared for an instant, long enough to reveal the silhouettes of trees leaning inward, subtly curving toward them, then vanished. The match died, and then they understood all at once. They had never been alone. Not in the forest, not in the clearing, not in the dark. Something had always been here, something patient, something that knew them, studied them, and had no intention of letting them leave or perhaps of letting them exist at all. The fire would not stay lit. The forest would not let them. And in that realization, the whispers grew louder, threading through the shadows in tones almost human but deliberately, cruelly wrong. They huddled together, waiting, listening, knowing that the night had become infinite, and that they were not the observers, they were the observed. The darkness waited, and waited. A pale handprint appeared on the outside of the tent each morning, larger than any of theirs. It pressed against the nylon with deliberate weight, fingers splayed unnaturally wide, the palm elongated and distorted in a way that made them shiver. The first day, they laughed it off, blaming dew, condensation, or some branch brushing against the canvas. Mark had even suggested a bear, though the corners of his mouth twitched with unease. Jess rolled her eyes. A bear that leaves a perfect handprint on a tent? Come on. Maya didn't speak. She traced the outline gently with a fingertip, noting the faint smudges, as if someone had pressed slowly, thinking, observing. Her eyes met the others. It's like it's watching us, she murmured. That night, the wind shifted oddly, looping through the clearing in inconsistent gusts. The branches rattled even where no wind should have reached, and the forest seemed to lean closer, responding to their presence. Around the campfire, the flames trembled, flickering with hesitation, and shadows twisted at the edges of the clearing in patterns that made no sense. Every small crack of wood, every distant cough or rustle sounded deliberate, calculated, as if the forest were listening and adjusting to them. By the second morning, the handprint had changed. The fingers stretched slightly longer, the palm broader, pressing against the canvas with more force. None of them had touched it. The thought made their stomachs twist. Maybe someone's messing with us, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. He had combed the underbrush thoroughly, yet found nothing. No footprints, no evidence of intruders, no tracks of any kind. Maya's gaze lingered. It's a message, she whispered. It knows we notice. The nights grew colder, the air heavier. Even when the fire burned brightly, the clearing seemed to shiver beyond its light. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the whisper of leaves, the faint creak of distant branches, felt amplified, meaningful, a language they could not understand. Sleep was fitful. Every shadow seemed to pause, watching, waiting, and the forest pulsed around them as if it were alive. On the third morning, the handprint had changed again. The fingers curved slightly inward, like a slow gesture reaching toward them. Jess recoiled, voice trembling. This is wrong. No one should be able to. She stopped. She didn't need to finish. They tried to leave the campsite. Every path they thought they remembered twisted subtly, as though the forest itself had rearranged the underbrush overnight. Compass and GPS wavered inexplicably, offering directions that seemed almost purposeful in their error. Anxiety coiled around them, tightening with every hesitant step. That night, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The fire sputtered low. Around them, shadows flickered, moving just outside the circle of light. The sound of slow, deliberate scraping circled the clearing. No footstep, no branch snapping. Just something sliding carefully over the forest floor, brushing near them, then retreating. Morning brought the fourth handprint. Now impossibly large, it spanned nearly the entire side of the tent. The fingers stretched unnaturally long, splayed at an angle that made the nylon bulge outward slightly, as though pressed from a solid form on the other side. They approached cautiously. None of them wanted to touch it, but their gazes were drawn irresistibly. The mark was precise, intentional, intelligent. Daniel's voice was shaky. It's showing us something, or warning us. I don't know which. Maya traced the outline once more. It doesn't need to hurt us. Not yet, but it wants us to know it's aware. The forest waited. Every moment outside the tent felt deliberate, charged, oppressive. Birds were silent. Insects had vanished. The air itself was dense, almost viscous, pressing in from every direction. Even the fire seemed hesitant, flickering as though aware of their fear. That night, they huddled in the tent, listening. Every noise, the distant snap of a branch, the faint rustle of leaves, felt choreographed. They dared not speak, fearing to break the fragile barrier of light and warmth around them. Shadows at the edge of the tent seemed to move independently, curving subtly, elongating, and shrinking again in impossible rhythms. By dawn, the handprint was gone. No smudge, no residue, just taut, pale fabric. They unpacked their gear silently, each movement tense, knowing the forest had not finished with them. The absence of the mark was deliberate, meaningful. They set off along what they thought was the trail, but the forest resisted. Paths they remembered had vanished. Familiar landmarks were gone. Every glance behind them carried weight. Every shadow seemed to shift in response to their attention. The feeling of being watched was no longer a thought. They were certain of it. Even as the morning mist lifted, the forest leaned inward, trees stretching, shadows flickering at the periphery of vision. The handprint had disappeared physically, but its presence lingered, etched into their minds. It was a reminder. They had been observed, studied, and nothing they could do would erase that knowledge. The campers walked faster, but the sense of scrutiny persisted. Every sound, the brushing of leaves, the snap of distant twigs, felt deliberate. The forest was patient. It had no need to reveal itself fully. Awareness alone was enough. In the back of their minds, the image of the handprint haunted them. Impossibly large, pale, pressing against the canvas with a quiet insistence. Something unseen had touched them with its attention, and that attention did not end when they left. Long after they emerged from the woods, shadows in darkened rooms, a fleeting brush against skin in the night, even the trembling of leaves in a gentle wind recalled that patient, observing force. They had noticed, and that alone, they realized with a shiver, was what it wanted. And somewhere, deep in the forest, it waited, still patient, still aware, waiting,